We've discussed at length how prevalent elder abuse and elder scams are in Shelby County. It's probably indicative of the national trend based on the aging of baby boomers. The first question is going to be, how do each of your agencies become involved in a case of alleged elder abuse, and what kind of collaboration is there between your agencies and others when an accusation comes to light? Sure.
Can y'all hear me? We get involved, obviously, when a report is filed. So that is such a huge challenge. And as you've already heard, every adult, every citizen of the state of Tennessee has a duty to report if you think a vulnerable adult is being abused. Same responsibility with our children. Every citizen of the state of Tennessee has a responsibility under the law to pick up the phone and call if you suspect someone's being abused. We don't want you getting a tape recorder and a trench coat and going out and taking DNA samples from people. Just pick up the phone and call and get that information to Adult Protective Services, DHS, MPD. TBI is also a great friend of ours in this fight against elder abuse. But we can't make a case and hold somebody accountable without that reporting and that investigation by our trained professionals.
Anybody else want to add something? Pat, did you want to say something?
Yes, there are brochures on the table out front about our Adult Protective Services program, and we receive referrals through our APS hotline, as I mentioned earlier, and they are answered by our APS centralized intake unit. We conduct joint investigations and other investigations and work collaboratively with law enforcement, the TBI, mental health, DIDS, and other agencies in order to help us in our investigations. So please call us, and the information is out front.
Professor McClurg made such a good point about how difficult it is to build a case of elder abuse when you have issues of proving coercion as well as consent issues on behalf of victims, to the point where Professor McClurg's actually drafted legislation to try to prove a certain amount of presumption, which is very difficult to do, I imagine, legally, because you're essentially proving what somebody thought in terms of the coercion of a victim. This next question dovetails into that very nicely. What does the law say about elder maltreatment in terms of definition, punishment, and the public's response, and how do you go about building a case?
Well, Amy could certainly talk more about how to build the case. First, I'd like to just comment on something Amy said about reporting. It's important to understand that the vast majority of elder abuse cases are never reported. That's part of the problem. Their statistics vary, but everyone agrees it's only a very small percentage of cases. The Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability says that only 1 in 23 incidents get reported. In terms of the legal landscape, I can say that as a general principle, and my research was national, not really related to Tennessee, we've just done a terrible job of protecting our elders. This country has passed hundreds of laws protecting children in recent years on the assumption that they are vulnerable and unable to protect themselves. Well, we've done very little to protect elders, even though they're vulnerable for several of the same reasons. And there are a number of measures that could be taken at no cost, legislative measures that would make it easier to prosecute offenders. It is very difficult, as Andy said, to unravel these transactions. Elder predators are experts. They're con artists, and the emphasis is on the word artist. Many of these people are pros, never underestimate them. They know how to operate in secret. They work on people. They pick people who live alone. So it's just the two of them. And the elder is often a poor witness, suffering from reduced cognitive abilities. And often it is not a fair fight when it comes to building a case. And that's one of the reasons for my presumption proposal. But I'm sure Amy could comment much more intelligently or thoroughly about actually building a case.
Sitting next to a law professor, because it still terrifies me.
Objection!
That's right. In Tennessee, abuse of a vulnerable adult, which is anyone over 60, or anyone over 18 that cannot care for themselves because of mental or physical disabilities. Abuse of a vulnerable adult is an E felony, which means it's punishable from anywhere from 0 days in prison to 6 years in prison. But keep in mind that judges, when they sentence offenders, are bound by the law and the sentencing scheme. I know Senator Tate is here, and our Shelby County delegation and our representatives and senators across the state do what they can every year to help us keep people in prison that need to be kept in prison. But it comes down to money. It comes down to the cost of incarceration. So if you're a first-time offender and you are prosecuted and convicted of an E felony, chances are very good that you are going to get diversion. You're going to get probation. You are going to get some alternative sentence to incarceration. It's the worst of the worst offenders that will actually do time in prison. Coupled a lot of times with the abuse of the vulnerable adult, though, may be more serious crimes, an aggravated assault, a criminal attempt murder. I was talking before breakfast, and it's not good morning talk, but we've seen an uptick in the DA's office of rape of elderly patients in nursing homes. And it's just as disturbing as it sounds. And those are reported and caught and prosecuted. What's been happening is good old-fashioned way of somebody walking in on the incident, because a lot of times the victims suffer from dementia, suffer from Alzheimer's, and have no recollection. And in terms of the financial end of elder abuse, financial scams against elders are, again, just an E felony. 0 to 6 years in prison, and for most first-time offenders, if they do any time, it's going to be at 30%. So for a lot of these, if they've been in custody the whole time that they've been waiting for their case to go to trial, they're going to be already have gotten credit for their time. But what we do, because we can, often the financial end is just going to be good old-fashioned theft. So instead of using the financial scam against an elder abuse or an elder citizen, we're going to use good old-fashioned theft and grade it that way. So a theft over $60,000 is going to be a B felony, at which you're looking at 8 to 40 years, depending on your record and what kind of wonderful contributions you've made to society. So we get a little creative because we have to, because these types of crimes destroy lives, physically, emotionally, mentally, financially. And we've got to make sure as prosecutors that we're applying the right law to the situation.